Most gardeners either dump wood ash straight onto their beds or they avoid it completely because they've heard it will, burn the soil. Both approaches are wrong. I've seen raised beds stall for an entire season because someone threw on a thick layer of ash thinking it was free fertilizer. The pH spiked, calcium locked out magnesium, and suddenly tomatoes were yellowing with perfect-looking soil on the surface. On the other side, I've seen growers with acidic, exhausted beds who could have corrected things cheaply with ash but never touched it out of fear. What changed my soil permanently wasn't just using wood ash. It was turning it into pellets and applying it with precision instead of guesswork. And if you care about real results, not garden folklore, this matters. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel now because this is the kind of practical soil management we focus on. Growing better food starts with understanding what you're actually putting into your soil. Let's talk about why raw wood ash is so easy to misuse. Wood ash is highly alkaline. Depending on the source, it can range between pH 9 and 13. It's rich in calcium carbonate and potassium, and it contains trace minerals like boron, manganese, and zinc. But it has almost no nitrogen. When you broadcast loose ash over a bed, especially fine powder, three things happen. First, it disperses unevenly. Second, wind carries it off. Third, it reacts quickly with moisture and can create localized high pH pockets that stress roots and soil microbes. I learned that the hard way in one of my 4x8 raised beds. I applied roughly 2 gallons of loose ash over 32 square feet after pruning season. Within 2 weeks, my lettuce showed clear micronutrient deficiencies. Soil tests showed the pH had jumped from 6.4 to 7.6. That's not catastrophic, but it was enough to slow growth and reduce iron availability. That's when I stopped treating ash like a dust and started treating it like an input that needed control. Here's why pelletizing changed everything. When you compress wood ash into pellets, you slow down its reaction rate in the soil. Instead of instant surface alkalinity, you get gradual mineral release. Pellets also allow precise application by weight rather than volume, which is, critical because ash density varies dramatically depending on the wood source. I make my pellets by mixing sifted wood ash with a small amount of compost tea or diluted molasses solution, just enough moisture to bind it. The ratio I use is about 10 parts dry ash to 1 part liquid by volume. You want it damp enough to clump, but not muddy. Then I press the mixture through a simple hand pellet press. You can also form small marble-sized balls by hand if you're working small scale. The pellets dry for 24 to 48 hours in a shaded, well-ventilated space. Once dry, they're stable, easy to handle, and far less dusty. Now let's talk about application rates, because this is where most gardeners go wrong. For raised beds with a pH between 6.0 and 6.5, I apply no more than 5 pounds of ash pellets per 100 square feet per year. That translates to roughly ½ pound for a standard 4x8 bed. That's it. Not buckets, not wheelbarrows. ½ pound, evenly distributed and lightly incorporated into the top 2 inches of soil. If the soil is more acidic, say 5.5, I might go up to 7 pounds per 100 square feet, but only after confirming with a soil test. Ash is not something you eyeball, it's chemistry. In my backyard trial, after switching to pellets and using controlled rates, the pH moved gradually from 6.2 to 6.8 over one growing season. That's ideal for most vegetables. Calcium levels improved, potassium availability increased, and I saw thicker stems in brassicas and noticeably improved fruit set in peppers. And here's something most people don't consider: microbial response. When ash is dumped raw, it can shock fungal networks. But pelletized ash, applied lightly, integrates into the soil matrix more gently. In my beds where I track compost temperatures and microbial activity, I noticed less surface crusting and better aggregation after pellet use. This is where monitoring matters. When I'm managing compost that will later blend with ash pellets, I rely on a long-stem thermometer like the Rio Temp heavy-duty compost thermometer, specifically the 36-inch stem model. In larger compost piles, you need to know when temperatures hit 55 to 65 degrees Celsius to ensure pathogen kill without going anaerobic. If you're serious about compost quality, that tool makes a difference. I've linked it in the description for those who want to check it out. It's not cheap, but if you're building biologically active compost to pair with mineral inputs like ash, temperature control is non-negotiable. Now let's address hydroponics, because yes, I tested this there too. You never add ash directly to a hydroponic reservoir. That's a guaranteed pH disaster. But I experimented with creating a filtered ash extract. I soaked 1 pound of ash pellets in 5 gallons of water for 48 hours, stirred periodically, then filtered through fine cloth. The resulting solution was heavily alkaline, so I diluted it 1 to 20 before testing on a non-circulating Kratky setup with leafy greens. The effect wasn't dramatic, and frankly, I don't recommend ash in hydroponics, unless you're correcting a specific mineral deficiency and you understand nutrient chemistry well. Hydro systems are about precision. Soil is more forgiving. Where ash pellets really shine is in long-term soil building. In one section of my garden, the soil had been cropped intensively for years. Organic matter hovered around 3%. After 2 seasons of integrating compost, cover crops, and controlled ash pellet applications, organic matter climbed to 4.5%, and cation exchange capacity improved noticeably. Calcium saturation balanced out without excessive liming. So, the key is integration, not isolation. Ash pellets work best when they're combined with carbon-rich compost and, regular organic inputs. I typically apply pellets in early spring before I transplant heavy feeders like tomatoes and cabbage. Then I side dress lightly again in late summer for fall crops, always making sure to stay within my annual limit. Let's correct a common myth. Wood ash is not a complete fertilizer. It really doesn't replace balanced fertility programs. Sure, it supplies potassium and calcium effectively, but it lacks nitrogen, and if you overuse it, can actually tie up phosphorus. So just treat it as a mineral amendment, not as plant food. Another mistake is using ash from treated wood or charcoal briquettes. That introduces contaminants and heavy metals which you definitely don't want in your soil. I only use ash from untreated hardwood burned cleanly. And here's a trade-off you need to understand. Raising soil pH improves nutrient availability up to a point. Beyond 7.2, you start limiting iron, manganese, and sometimes phosphorus. If you're growing blueberries or potatoes that prefer acidic soil, ash pellets are the wrong tool entirely. This is about matching the input to the crop and soil condition. What changed my soil forever wasn't the ash itself. It was, honestly, shifting from random amendment dumping to measured mineral management. Pelletizing, well, it forced me to weigh, calculate, and really observe. The results were steadier growth, fewer deficiency symptoms, and much more consistent yields. My tomato harvest increased by about 15% in weight over 2 seasons in the test bed. That wasn't magic. It was balanced calcium improving cell wall strength and potassium supporting fruit development. If you've got a fireplace or wood stove and you're throwing ash away, you're discarding a valuable mineral resource. But if you're scattering it blindly, you're gambling with your soil biology. Turn it into pellets, measure it, apply it with intent. That's how you move from gardening by tradition to gardening by results. If this kind of practical soil work helps you grow better food, subscribe to the channel and, share this video with someone who's serious about improving their soil instead of chasing quick fixes. The more we understand what's happening beneath our feet, the better everything above ground performs.